The frontier town of Redemption Creek fell silent as Maria Cooper's golden locks tumbled to the dust. Her father's drunken laughter cut deeper than the dull razor that stripped away her crowning glory, payment for a poker debt he couldn't cover. Townsfolk gathered, their whispers like rattlesnakes in the dry grass. Women turned away, men snickered. Not one soul stepped forward as tears carved clean lines down her dirt-streaked face. Then came Troy, tall against the setting sun, dark eyes meeting hers without pity. Only certainty. "I'll marry you tonight," he said, words quiet as a prayer, yet heard by all. Could a woman shamed find honor in the arms of a man her people called enemy? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. William Cooper's weathered fingers traced the edge of the ivory poker chip, his bloodshot eyes fixed on the sorry pile before him. The saloon's smoky haze couldn't mask the desperation etched across his face. "One more hand," he slurred, ignoring the warning glance from the barkeep. "You're tapped out, Cooper," drawled Samuel Blackwood, a cattle baron with cold eyes and a reputation for ruthlessness. "Unless you've got something else to wager." "Anything," William muttered, the whiskey speaking louder than reason. "Name it." A cruel smile played across Blackwood's lips. "That pretty daughter of yours has hair like spun gold. Bet that would fetch a fine price." The table fell silent. Even in the frontier's loose moral code, this crossed a line. "You want to buy my daughter's hair?" William asked, confusion momentarily piercing his drunken haze. "Not buy it, just watch you shear it off. Public-like. Tomorrow at noon." Blackwood's eyes glittered with malice. "Folks around here could use some entertainment." William hesitated, only briefly before nodding. "Deal." Maria Cooper hummed softly as she pinned up her golden hair, preparing for Sunday services. At 22, she'd become accustomed to managing the Cooper household since her mother's departure 5 years ago. The small mirror reflected a face lined with premature worry, but her eyes still held quiet dignity. The door slammed open. William stumbled in, reeking of whiskey and defeat. "Pa!" Maria turned, instantly alert to the particular quality of his drunkenness. This wasn't his usual melancholy stupor, but something darker. "Lost big," he mumbled, slumping into a chair. "Made a deal." Maria's stomach knotted. "What kind of deal, Pa?" When he finally met her eyes, shame flickered briefly before drowning in alcohol-fueled belligerence. "Your hair, noon tomorrow. Town Square." The blood drained from Maria's face. "My hair? You wagered my hair in a game?" "It'll grow back," he snapped defensively. "Better than losing the house." Maria touched her golden braid instinctively, her one beauty the feature that occasionally drew kind glances in a harsh world. "You had no right. I'm your father." William stood, swaying slightly. "While you're under my roof, the roof I keep over our heads." Maria interrupted, a rare defiance rising in her voice. "While you drink away what little we have." His hand moved before either of them realized his intent. The slap echoed in the small room, leaving a bright mark on Maria's cheek. Silence stretched between them, broken only when William grabbed the razor from the washstand. "Noon tomorrow. Don't make me drag you there." Ab words spread through Redemption Creek like wildfire. By morning, Maria could feel the stares as she collected water from the well, her hair bound tightly beneath a bonnet, perhaps for the last time. "Heard about your pa's wager," Miss Peterson whispered, a neighbor who'd once been kind. "Shameful business." The woman hurried away before Maria could respond, as though misfortune might be catching. By midday, a crowd had gathered in the dusty town square. Maria stood rigid beside the barber's chair. Someone had dragged outside the saloon. William swayed nearby, already deep in his cups, unable to meet her eyes. Samuel Blackwood addressed the gathered townsfolk with theatrical flair. "Folks, we're here to witness a debt paid in full." He gestured toward Maria. "Cooper's daughter will sacrifice her crowning glory to honor her father's word." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few women looked away, discomfort plain on their faces. Most men grinned in anticipation of the spectacle. "Get on with it," William growled, thrusting the razor toward Maria. With trembling hands, she removed her bonnet. The autumn sun caught her golden hair, making it shine one last time. A collective intake of breath from the crowd only deepened her humiliation. "I'll do it." William snatched back the razor, his shame finding outlet in roughness. The first lock fell to the dust, then another. Maria closed her eyes, each scrape of the blade against her scalp another indignity to bear. Tears threatened, but she refused to give them that satisfaction. The pile of golden hair grew at her feet, while her father's unsteady hand left patches and nicks across her exposed scalp. When it was done, Maria opened her eyes to a town that no longer wished to look at her. Women turned away. Men snickered behind raised hands. Children stared openly until pulled away by parents. She stood alone in a circle of her fallen hair, surrounded by neighbors who had become strangers in an instant. Troy Running Wolf watched from the shadow of the general store, his dark eyes missing nothing. He'd ridden into Redemption Creek that morning for supplies. Not spectacle, but the gathering crowd had drawn his attention. Now his hand instinctively touched the small medicine pouch hanging from his neck as the woman's golden hair fell to the dust. The leather pouch contained sacred items, a hawk feather from his first vision quest, a small stone from his grandfather's burial ground, and dried sage for protection. His grandfather had given him the pouch when Troy was 12, saying, "This will keep you balanced when you walk between worlds." And walk between worlds he did. His Apache mother and white trader father had left him straddling two cultures, belonging fully to neither. Though raised among the Apache, after his father's death, Troy's lighter skin and his father's knowledge of English had made him useful as an occasional intermediary. It also made him perpetually suspect in both communities. The woman's quiet dignity as she endured her humiliation stirred something in him. While others turned away, he found himself unable to look elsewhere. He recognized the particular pride in her straight spine, the controlled breath of someone determined not to break down. He knew that posture well had held it himself under the scrutinizing eyes of tribal elders and white settlers alike. As the last of her hair fell, Troy noted how the crowd drew back, creating a physical manifestation of their sudden rejection. Their cowardice hardened something in him. Without conscious decision, he stepped forward. The gathered townsfolk noticed him immediately. Conversations hushed. Several men placed hands near holstered weapons, a reaction Troy had grown accustomed to over his 32 years. "Apaches watching," someone whispered loudly enough for all to hear. Troy ignored them, his focus solely on the woman who stood alone in a circle of her shorn hair. Blood beaded in places where the razor had cut too close. Her eyes, when they met his, held no plea for rescue, only a weary acceptance of this new indignity becoming a spectacle for an Indian. "Evening, Chief," the man called Blackwood drawled, using the deliberately ignorant title white men favored for any Indian, regardless of tribe or rank. "Enjoying the show?" Troy continued forward until he stood directly before the woman. Up close, he could see the fine tremor in her hands, the only outward sign of her distress. "I'll marry you tonight," he said quietly, but clearly enough for those nearest to hear. A shocked silence descended before someone barked a laugh. The savage once the shorn sheep. Troy didn't turn to acknowledge the taunt. His eyes remained on the woman's face, watching surprise replace humiliation, if only briefly. "What did you say?" she whispered, her voice rough from holding back tears. "I said I will marry you tonight," Troy repeated, his low voice steady. "If you wish it." Her father stumbled forward then, alcohol making him brave. "My daughter ain't marrying no Indian." Troy finally broke his gaze from the woman, to regard her father with cool assessment. "You forfeit the right to decide when you forfeit her dignity," he said evenly. Then, to the woman again, "What is your name?" She hesitated, then lifted her chin slightly. "Maria Cooper." Troy nodded once. "I am Troy Running Wolf." He touched his medicine pouch again, a habitual gesture when making important decisions. I have a cabin. It's not much, but it's clean. You would be respected there. Blackwood stepped forward, clearly displeased at losing control of his entertainment. Now, see here, Indian. My name is Troy, he interrupted without looking away from Maria. And I'm speaking to Miss Cooper. The gathered crowd shifted uncomfortably. White women simply weren't offered choices by Indian men. Not in public, not ever. Why? Maria asked, the single word containing volumes. Troy considered his answer carefully. Because I recognize strength when I see it, he finally said. And because I know what it is to stand alone. Maria's eyes searched his for deception or mockery. Finding neither. Around them the crowd's murmurs grew louder, disapproval gathering like storm clouds. She ain't going nowhere with you, her father slurred, grabbing for Maria's arm. She stepped aside, evading his grasp with practiced ease. Then, to the astonishment of everyone gathered, Maria Cooper looked directly at Troy and said, "When and where?" "Sundown," Troy answered. "Edge of town by the lightning-struck oak." She nodded once. A decision made. Troy turned and walked away, feeling the stares of the entire town burning into his back. His hand closed around his medicine pouch, his grandfather's words echoing in his mind. Sometimes the path between worlds is the only honorable one. Maria slipped into her small bedroom, closing the door against her father's drunken ranting. Her fingers found the wooden hairbrush on her nightstand, her mother's parting gift. For years she'd brushed her golden hair 100 strokes each night, a ritual that connected her to the woman who had fled west rather than endure William Cooper's decline. Now Maria's fingers traced the brush's worn handle, the bristles that would no longer serve their purpose. She brought it to her scalp, wincing as it passed over the small cuts left by her father's unsteady hand. The brush collected nothing. Her crowning glory lay trampled in the town square dust. A noise at the window startled her. Troy's face appeared, expression unreadable in the fading light. "You shouldn't be here," Maria whispered, though she made no move to call out. "We need to speak," Troy replied, his voice low, away from listening ears. Maria hesitated, then nodded toward the back of the house. Minutes later, they stood in the shadow of the woodshed, the evening air cooling rapidly around them. "Did you mean what you said?" Maria asked without preamble, one hand self-consciously touching her shorn head. "I don't speak empty words," Troy answered. The setting sun cast his features in bronze relief, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the watchful intensity of his eyes. "Why would you marry a woman you don't know?" "A white woman?" Maria pressed, searching his face for hidden motives. Troy was silent for a moment, considering. "I know enough. I saw how you stood. Dignity has no color. People will talk. People always talk," he said with a slight shrug. "I've been talked about since birth." Maria gripped the hairbrush tighter. "What kind of marriage are you proposing?" Again Troy took his time answering. "A respectful one. You need protection and a place away from shame. I can provide both. And what do you get from this arrangement?" A ghost of a smile touched Troy's lips. "My cabin needs a woman's touch." And perhaps, he paused, choosing his words carefully, perhaps the company would not be unwelcome. Maria studied him, this man who stood so differently from the townsman she'd known all her life. No swagger, no unnecessary movements, just a contained strength and directness she found oddly comforting. "I would expect you to work alongside me," Troy continued. "Life is not easy where I live. I'm no stranger to work," Maria replied, thinking of the years spent managing her father's household while he drank away what little they had. "And I would not Troy hesitated, the first sign of discomfort he'd shown. "That is to say, you would have your own space, until you wish otherwise." Maria felt heat rise to her cheeks, the implication clear. "A marriage in name only." "For now," Troy nodded, "though I won't lie to you, I find you—" He paused again, searching for the right word. "Compelling." The unexpected compliment, delivered so matter-of-factly, caught Maria off guard. No man had spoken to her with such honest directness before. "Your father," Troy said, changing the subject, He will object. As if summoned by the mention, William Cooper's voice bellowed from the house. Maria, where are you, girl? Maria's grip tightened on the hairbrush until her knuckles whitened. He gambled away my hair today. What might he wager tomorrow? Troy nodded, understanding the unspoken fear. Then you'll come? Yes, Maria said. The decision suddenly crystal clear. I'll meet you at the oak. The back door of the house slammed open. William's unsteady silhouette framed in the lamplight. Who's out there? Maria. Troy melted into the shadows with a silent grace that belied his size. Maria stepped forward, keeping the hairbrush hidden in the folds of her skirt. Just getting kindling, Pa, she called, her voice steadier than she felt. William squinted into the darkness. Thought I heard voices. Just me talking to myself, Maria answered, moving toward the house. Old habits. Her father grunted, unconvinced but too drunk to pursue it. Better not be sneaking off. You're still my daughter, Sean or not. Maria passed him, careful to stay beyond reach of his unpredictable hands. I know exactly whose daughter I am, Pa. I'm reminded every day. Inside, she placed the wooden hairbrush in a small bundle with her mother's Bible and a change of clothes. By sunrise, she would be a married woman. By sunrise, she would be free of William Cooper forever. Or so she hoped. The lightning-struck oak stood sentinel at Redemption Creek's edge, its split trunk reaching toward the heavens like beseeching hands. Maria arrived as the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the dusty path. Her bundle clutched tightly under one arm. She fought the urge to look back at the town that had been her entire world for 22 years. Troy was already waiting, his tall figure motionless against the dying light. Beside him stood two unexpected witnesses. Reverend Thomas, the town's perpetually disapproving preacher, and Martha Gunderson, the Norwegian widow who ran the general store. The Reverend's pinched expression suggested extreme reluctance, while Martha's kind eyes offered unexpected support. You came, Troy said simply when Maria approached. I said I would, she replied, chin lifting slightly despite the self-consciousness that plagued her with every breeze against her exposed scalp. Reverend Thomas cleared his throat. I want it noted that I advised strongly against this union. However, Mrs. Gunderson has convinced me that my duty requires my presence. His disapproval was palpable, though I still maintain that such marriages rarely end well. Hush now, Reverend, Martha interjected with quiet authority. These two souls need blessing, not judgment. She turned to Maria, extending a small package wrapped in calico. For you, child. Every bride deserves a gift. Maria accepted the package with trembling fingers but didn't open it. Words of gratitude stuck in her throat, unfamiliar after a day of humiliation. Troy stepped forward, holding something in his weathered palm, a simple braided cord made of leather and what appeared to be horsehair. 3 strands interwoven, one dark, one light, and one a mixture of both. In my mother's tribe, he explained, his deep voice steady, marriages are bound with cord to symbolize the joining of separate lives into one path. He offered it to Maria. If you're willing. Maria stared at the humble cord. No gold ring, no elaborate promises, just 3 braided strands and the offer of a new beginning. She nodded, unable to trust her voice. Then let us proceed. The Reverend sighed, opening his worn Bible, though I maintain this is highly irregular. As the Reverend began the sparse ceremony, Maria became aware of shapes in the distance, townspeople watching from a safe remove, curiosity overcoming their distaste. She recognized Mrs. Peterson's distinctive bonnet, the blacksmith's broad shoulders, even Samuel Blackwood's tall hat. Had they come to mock, or merely to confirm the rumors already racing through Redemption Creek? Do you, Maria Cooper, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? The Reverend's hesitation before the word man was slight, but unmistakable. Maria met Troy's dark eyes, finding in them not passion or triumph, but a steady resolve that matched her own. I do, she said, clear enough for even the distant onlookers to hear. When Troy spoke his vows, his voice carried the same certainty. No hesitation, no doubt, just the simple weight of a promise made. Under the cord, Troy prompted when the Reverend seemed ready to conclude. Martha stepped forward, helping them as Troy wrapped the braided cord around their joined hands once, twice, 3 times. 3 circles, Troy explained quietly. For past, present, and future. This isn't part of the Christian ceremony. The Reverend objected. It is part of ours, Troy replied calmly, meeting the Reverend's gaze until the older man looked away. With the cord binding them, Troy spoke words in his native tongue, the unfamiliar sounds both harsh and melodic to Maria's ears. When he finished, he loosened the cord, carefully folding it and placing it in Maria's palm. "Keep this," he said, "a reminder that some bonds are chosen, not forced upon us." The simplicity of the gesture brought unexpected tears to Maria's eyes. She quickly blinked them away, refusing to show weakness now. "By the power vested in me," the Reverend concluded with obvious reluctance, "I now pronounce you man and wife." No mention of a kiss, no celebration. Just Martha's quiet congratulations and the Reverend's hasty departure toward town. No doubt to report every detail of the scandalous ceremony. "My horse is waiting," Troy said, gesturing toward a stand of cottonwoods. "Are you ready?" Maria allowed herself one last glance at Redemption Creek, where even now her father might be searching for her, where tomorrow her absence would fuel gossip in every household. She thought of the empty hairbrush in her bundle, years spent in service to a man who had gambled away her dignity without a second thought. "Yes," she said, turning back to Troy, the braided cord clutched tightly in her fist. "I'm ready." The Mustang's steady gait carried them farther from Redemption Creek with each passing minute. Troy sat tall in the saddle, Maria perched behind him, her arms hesitantly encircling his waist. The horse, a dappled gray with intelligent eyes, seemed unbothered by the double burden, picking its way confidently through terrain that grew increasingly rugged as they left the main trail. Maria had never ridden like this before, pressed against a man's back, inhaling the unfamiliar sense of leather, sage and wood smoke that clung to Troy's clothing. The intimacy of it made her simultaneously anxious and aware, her body tensing with each adjustment of the horse beneath them. "Shadow knows the way," Troy said, breaking the silence that had stretched between them since leaving town. "We'll be there by morning." "Shadow?" Maria questioned, grateful for the simple conversation. "The Mustang," Troy explained. "Found him 3 winters ago, half-starved after escaping a government roundup. We recognized something in each other." Maria absorbed this, wondering what Troy had recognized in her today, what common ground existed between a shamed white woman and a man who walked between 2 worlds. "You should sleep if you can," Troy suggested, as darkness settled fully around them. "I'll keep us on the path." Sleep seemed impossible with the unfamiliar motion of the horse and the solid presence this stranger, her husband, before her. Yet exhaustion eventually claimed her, her forehead coming to rest against Troy's back as her consciousness drifted. She woke to moonlight bathing the landscape in silver. They had stopped beside a small creek, Shadow drinking deeply from the clear water. "Halfway there," Troy said, noticing her stirring. He offered a water skin. "Drink, the air gets drier as we climb." Maria accepted it gratefully, suddenly aware of her parched throat. As she drank, the cool night air brushed against her exposed scalp, bringing an involuntary shiver. Without comment, Troy removed a bandana from his saddlebag and offered it to her. "For your head, the night has teeth out here." The simple kindness, offered without pity or comment, threatened to unravel the tight control Maria had maintained all day. She took the bandana with a murmured thanks, wrapping it around her head with fingers that trembled slightly. "May I ask where we're going?" she ventured, as Troy checked Shadow's tack. "My cabin sits in a small valley beyond White Rock Canyon," he replied. "Not quite Apache territory, not quite white settlement, suitable for someone who belongs to both worlds and neither. And now for someone who belongs nowhere," Maria added softly. Troy's hands stilled. "You belong to yourself, Maria Cooper." Perhaps for the first time. The insight startled her. Was that why she'd felt that strange sense of liberation alongside her shame? With her hair shorn and her reputation in tatters, the expectations that had constrained her life had also been cut away. "Will your people accept me?" she asked as Troy helped her remount. "They are not exactly my people," he replied, swinging up behind her. "The Apache tolerate me because of my mother's blood, but I live apart from the tribe. We will see them occasionally for trading, nothing more. And the settlers keep their distance, which suits me well enough." Shadow began moving again, settling into his steady rhythm. "The nearest white family is half a day's ride. They're Quakers, less troubled by my heritage than most." Maria processed this new reality, a life of isolation with a man she barely knew. Yet the alternative, remaining in Redemption Creek, a subject of ridicule and pity, seemed far worse. "What will I do there?" she asked, practical concerns surfacing now that the immediate crisis had passed. "Live," Troy answered simply. "The cabin needs tending. There's a small garden, chickens, work enough for 4 hands, instead of 2. Beyond that," he paused, "beyond that is for you to decide." The notion of choice, of decisions that were hers alone to make, was as foreign to Maria as the rugged landscape through which they traveled. Her life had been a series of obligations to her father after her mother left, to the expectations of proper behavior in a frontier town, to the narrow path available to a woman of her station. Now the path ahead was as unknown as the man beside her. As if sensing her thoughts, Troy spoke again. "I make you one promise, Maria. You will never be property at my cabin. Not a horse to be traded, not hair to be wagered." The quiet dignity in his voice reached something deep within her. For the first time since the razor had touched her scalp, Maria felt the knot of shame in her chest begin to loosen. Shadow carried them onward, through the moonlit wilderness, each hoofbeat taking Maria farther from everything she had known, toward a future she could not yet imagine. Dawn broke over the mountains, painting the landscape in shades of amber and gold, as Troy guided Shadow through a narrow pass. Maria, stiff from the night's journey, straightened as the trees parted to reveal a small valley cradled between rocky slopes. A stream glinted in the early light, winding past a cabin nestled against the western ridge. "There," Troy said, the single word carrying a weight of meaning. "Home." The cabin was larger than Maria had expected, a sturdy structure of logs and stone with a small covered porch and chimney. Nearby stood a modest barn, a chicken coop and what appeared to be a garden plot. Smoke rose from the chimney in a thin, welcoming spiral. "Someone's there," Maria said, tension returning to her voice. "Old Joseph," Troy explained. "A friend who watches things when I'm away. He'll be gone before sundown." As they approached, an elderly Apache man emerged from the cabin. He observed their arrival with keen eyes that missed nothing, including Maria's bandana-covered head and the bundle clutched in her lap. Troy dismounted first, helping Maria down with hands that were strong yet careful. Her legs nearly buckled after the long ride, but she forced herself to stand straight as Troy spoke to old Joseph in the Apache tongue. The old man's weathered face remained impassive, though his gaze returned to Maria several times during the brief conversation. Finally, Troy switched to English. "Joseph, this is Maria, my wife." The simple introduction, the first time Troy had called her that, brought the reality of their situation into sharp focus. She was a wife now. This unknown place was her home. Old Joseph nodded once, then spoke in accented but clear English. The spirits work in strange ways. Without further comment, he gathered his few belongings and departed, leading his pony toward the eastern trail. Alone with Troy for the first time since their hasty marriage, Maria stood uncertainly at the edge of what was now her home. "Come," Troy said, taking Shadow's rein. "I'll show you inside after I tend to him." Maria followed Troy to the small barn where he efficiently unsaddled Shadow, rubbing the horse down with practiced movements while she watched from the doorway. The familiar routine of caring for an animal after a journey gave her a moment to gather herself, to prepare for this new chapter. The cabin's interior surprised her. Though simple, it was clean and thoughtfully arranged. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, its hearth swept and fire carefully banked. A wooden table with 2 chairs stood nearby. Shelves held cooking implements, jars of preserved food, and a few books, unexpected treasures in such a remote location. A curtain partitioned the rear of the cabin. Behind it, Maria discovered a neatly made bed, a trunk, and a small table supporting a covered object. Curiosity drew her forward. She lifted the cloth to reveal a hand-carved wooden mirror, its surface polished to a soft gleam. "My father made it," Troy said from the doorway, startling her. "One of the few things of his I kept." Maria quickly replaced the cover. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have." "It's your home now," Troy interrupted. "You should know what's in it." Home. The word hung between them, laden with implications neither was ready to address. Troy cleared his throat. "You'll sleep here," he said, gesturing to the bed. "I'll make a place for myself by the fire until—" He left the sentence unfinished, the until hanging unspoken between them. Until she was ready. Until this strange arrangement became something more. Until— "There's water heating," Troy continued, moving back to the main room. "For washing. You must be tired from the journey." The consideration in his voice, so different from her father's demanding tones, caught Maria off guard. "Thank you," she managed, following him. Troy showed her where things were kept, explaining the rhythms of life in this remote place, when the chickens needed tending, how the garden was arranged, where the best water could be drawn. Practical matters that required no discussion of feelings or expectation. As he spoke, Maria found her gaze repeatedly drawn to the covered mirror. She hadn't seen her reflection since the shearing, had avoided every shiny surface in Redemption Creek during her final hours there. What would she see now? A stranger? A shame-marked woman? Or something else entirely? "I'll leave you to rest," Troy said, heading for the door. "There's food when you're hungry. You don't need to sleep outside," Maria blurted, surprising herself. "It's your home. I can make a pallet by the fire." Troy paused, his hand on the door latch. "No," he said firmly, but not unkindly. "You need privacy more than I need comfort." With that, he stepped outside, closing the door softly behind him. Alone in the cabin, her cabin now, Maria slowly unwrapped the bandana from her head. Her fingers trembled as she moved toward the partition, toward the covered mirror that waited like a verdict. The morning sun had crested the eastern ridge when Maria emerged from the cabin, rested but disoriented. She found Troy at the edge of the property, placing a large stone alongside several others that formed a rough line between the cleared land and the wilderness beyond. "Boundary stones," Troy explained when he noticed her approach. "They mark where our land ends." "Our land," a casual possessive pronoun hung in the air between them. "How much is ours?" Maria asked, testing the word herself. Troy straightened, wiping his hands on his worn buckskin pants. "From the stream to the ridge. Not much by white standards, but enough for what we need." He gestured toward the valley floor. "Good soil near the water. The ridge protects from the worst winter winds." Maria studied the landscape with new eyes, not as a visitor, but as someone with a stake in this isolated place. She had slept deeply, exhausted from the journey and emotional turmoil, waking to find a small breakfast laid out and Troy already engaged in his morning tasks. "I should learn the boundaries," she said. "All of them." Troy's dark eyes assessed her, understanding her meaning extended beyond property lines. "Yes," he agreed. "Come." He led her along the perimeter of their land, pointing out landmarks and explaining the seasonal changes to expect. As they walked, he established other boundaries as well, the ones that would define their unusual marriage. "I trade with both settlements," he told her, as they paused by a large boundary stone overlooking the valley. "Apache for furs and leather, whites for tools and supplies we can't make. You'll be watched closely by both." "Judged, you mean?" Maria said, no bitterness in her observation, merely acceptance. "Yes, but judgment only has the power we give it." Troy lifted the heavy stone, positioning it more securely. "This is another boundary to learn what matters and what doesn't." They continued to the garden where early vegetables pushed through the rich soil. "Your domain if you wish it," Troy offered. "I have skill with hunting, less with growing." "I can manage a garden," Maria replied, already noting what needed attention. The familiar tasks would give her purpose, a way to contribute to this partnership. Near the chicken coop, Troy paused again. You should know there are mountain lions in these parts. Never go beyond the boundary stones unarmed. He showed her a rifle kept in a weatherproof box near the barn. Can you shoot? My father taught me when I was 12, Maria answered, before the drinking took over. Troy nodded, satisfied. Good. Independence requires protection. The word struck Maria forcibly. Independence, not something often granted to women, especially wives, yet Troy spoke of it as a natural right. As the day progressed, Troy continued Maria's education in the rhythms and requirements of their shared life. He showed her the smoke signals that would alert neighboring Apache if danger threatened, the cache of emergency supplies hidden in a cave behind the cabin, the signs of weather change specific to this valley. You're teaching me to survive without you, Maria observed, as they returned to the cabin for the midday meal. Yes, Troy acknowledged without elaboration. Why, she pressed, needing to understand this man who defied all her expectations of husband. Troy considered her question, giving it the weight it deserved. Because no person should depend entirely on another, he finally said. It breeds resentment on one side, contempt on the other. The wisdom in his words, so at odds with the dependency her father had fostered, made Maria study him with new appreciation. There's another boundary you should understand, Troy said, as they shared a simple meal of cornbread and dried venison, between husband and wife. Maria tensed slightly, uncertain where this conversation might lead. I'll not enter your sleeping space uninvited, Troy stated plainly. I will not make demands of your body or your affections. Those must be freely given or not at all. The blunt declaration, delivered without artifice or expectation, brought unexpected moisture to Maria's eyes. She blinked it away quickly, unwilling to be ruled by emotion. And if they are never given, she asked, her voice steady despite the intimate nature of their discussion. Then we have a partnership of friendship and mutual support, Troy replied, his expression revealing nothing of his personal hopes or disappointments. That is not a small thing, Maria nodded, a weight lifting from her shoulder. Boundaries, clearly defined and freely accepted, offered security she had rarely known. Thank you, she said simply. Troy inclined his head in acknowledgement, then rose to continue his day's work. At the door he paused, looking back at this woman who was now inexorably part of his life. One last boundary, Maria, he said quietly. The past ends at Redemption Creek. What matters is what we build here now. With that, he stepped outside, leaving Maria to consider all the boundaries, physical, emotional, temporal, that would define their unusual marriage. 3 weeks had passed since Maria's arrival at the cabin. Her hands, once soft from household work, now bore calluses from gardening and chopping wood. Her skin had darkened under the mountain sun, and the stubble on her head had grown into a soft fuzz that caught the light like tarnished copper. Each day brought new lessons in this life between worlds, some taught by Troy, others learned through her own observation and effort. She was hanging laundry when she first noticed the dust rising from the eastern trail, the one leading to Apache territory. Troy, mending a leather harness near the barn, saw it too. His posture shifted subtly, alert but not alarmed. Visitors, he said, setting aside his work. From my mother's people. Maria's hands stilled on the damp fabric. Should I go inside? Troy considered the question. No, better they see you working, living here as if you belong, as if she belonged. The phrase echoed in Maria's mind as she deliberately returned to her task, though her attention remained fixed on the approaching rider. 3 figures materialized from the dust cloud, their straight backs and fluid movements identifying them, even at a distance. Troy walked to the edge of the property to greet them, raising his hand in a gesture. Maria had seen him practice with shadow, calm, deliberate, unthreatening. Words were exchanged in the Apache language too distant for Maria to hear even if she could have understood them. After several minutes, Troy beckoned her forward. Wiping her hands on her apron, Maria crossed the yard, intensely aware of her shorn head and work-stained dress. She felt their eyes upon her, assessing, curious, perhaps judgmental. Maria, Troy said when she reached them, these are people of my mother's clan. Nahila, clan elder, Keme her son, and Tulasi her daughter. Maria nodded respectfully to each, noting the elaborate beadwork on the elder woman's clothing, the proud set of the young man's shoulders, and the openly suspicious gaze of the daughter who appeared close to Maria's own age. The woman with no hair, Tulasi said in accented English, her dark eyes fixing on Maria's head. Before Maria could respond, the elder woman, Nahila, spoke sharply to her daughter. Then, surprisingly, she extended an eagle feather toward Troy, a gift from the council. Troy translated as he accepted it with evident reverence. For our marriage, our marriage. The words sounded strange to Maria's ears. An arrangement born of desperation now acknowledged as something legitimate. Nahila spoke again, her weathered face impassive though her eyes missed nothing about Maria's appearance or the cabin's condition. She says you are welcome to visit the summer camp, Troy translated, to learn the women's ways if you wish. The invitation, clearly significant based on Troy's expression, hung in the air between them. Maria inclined her head toward the elder. Thank you, she said simply. I would be honored to learn. Keme said something that made Troy's jaw tighten momentarily before he relaxed again. A challenge of some kind, Maria guessed, though Troy offered no translation. The visitors dismounted, and what Maria had anticipated would be a brief encounter extended into a lengthy visit. Nahila inspected the garden, nodding occasionally at Maria's efforts. Keme and Troy spoke in low tones near the boundary stones. Tulasi followed Maria as she resumed her chores, her presence both inquisitive and vaguely hostile. Why did he marry white woman? Tulasi asked bluntly as Maria gathered eggs from the chicken coop. Maria considered her answer carefully. He offered protection when I had none. Because of this, Tulasi gestured toward Maria's head. Yes, among our people, a woman's hair is her glory. Tulasi said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. Some say Troy has taken a woman with no glory. The words were meant to wound, and they found their mark. Maria's hands tightened around the gathered eggs, but she kept her expression neutral. Perhaps he saw something else in me, she replied evenly. Tulasi studied her, seeming disappointed by the lack of visible reaction. Before she could respond, Nahila called her daughter back to the group with a sharp word. As the afternoon waned, the visitors prepared to depart. Troy and Keme had reached some understanding, their initial tension replaced by a guarded respect. Nahila approached Maria directly, speaking a few words in Apache while pressing something into her palm. A small pouch of seeds, for growing strong plants, Troy translated, and strong spirit. The unexpected kindness brought a lump to Maria's throat. A hee-hee, she said, using the Apache word for thank you, that she'd heard Troy use. A flicker of approval crossed Nahila's face before she turned to mount her horse. The visitors departed as they had come, their straight backs disappearing into the landscape. That evening, as Maria prepared their meal, she noticed Troy handling the eagle feather with unusual care, before placing it above the cabin door. It's a blessing, he explained, noticing her observation, and a recognition. They don't approve of me, Maria said, not a question but a statement. Some don't, Troy acknowledged. Others will reserve judgment. A few, like Nahila, see beyond appearances. Maria touched her growing hair, self-consciously. Tulasi said, I have no glory. Troy's dark eyes met hers across the cabin. Tulasi once hoped to be in your place, he said simply. Her words come from disappointment, not truth. Dark clouds gathered over the mountains, promising the first substantial rain since Maria's arrival. She worked quickly, securing the chicken coop and harvesting what vegetables might be damaged by heavy downpours. Troy had ridden out at dawn to check his trapping lines, leaving her alone with the increasingly ominous sky. Inside the cabin, Maria lit the lamps against the premature darkness and stoked the fire. The first fat drops began to fall as she placed a kettle of stew over the flames. By the time Troy's distinctive whistle announced his return, the rain had become a steady drumbeat against the roof. He entered in a rush of cool air and rainwater, his hair plastered to his face. Clothes soaked through, Without a word, Maria handed him a blanket from beside the fire. Their fingers brushed briefly in the exchange, a small contact that no longer startled her as it once had. "Storm settling in for the night," Troy said, removing his wet shirt and hanging it near the hearth. "Might be 2 or 3 days of this." Maria nodded, trying not to stare at his bare torso, the lean muscle, the scars that mapped a history she didn't yet know. 2 months of marriage, and still such basic intimacies felt new and slightly forbidden. As they shared the evening meal, thunder rattled the windows, and lightning illuminated the cabin in brief, ghostly flashes. The storm created an unexpected cocoon around them, isolating their small home from the wider world. "I found something today," Maria said during a lull in the thunder. While organizing the storage trunk, she reached into her pocket and withdrew a folded letter, yellowed with age. "It has my mother's handwriting." Troy raised an eyebrow but said nothing, allowing her to continue. "It's addressed to me, but I've never seen it before." Maria turned the unopened letter in her hands. "My father must have kept it from me." "Are you going to read it?" Troy asked quietly. Maria hesitated. "I'm afraid of what it might say. Why she left. Why she never came back for me." The confession hung in the space between them, the first truly personal revelation she had offered Troy. The storm growled overhead, as if urging her to continue this unburdening. "In my experience," Troy said carefully, "knowing a difficult truth is better than imagining countless possibilities." Maria nodded, breaking the seal with trembling fingers. As she read silently, her expression shifted from apprehension to confusion to a deep sadness. "She was dying," Maria finally said, folding the letter again. "Consumption. She left because she didn't want my father to bankrupt us with useless treatments, or for me to watch her wither away." A single tear escaped, tracking down her cheek. "She thought she was protecting me." Troy remained silent, offering presence without intrusion. "All these years I thought she abandoned us," Maria continued. "I thought I wasn't enough reason for her to stay." "The stories we tell ourselves are powerful," Troy said, "sometimes more powerful than truth." "What stories have you told yourself?" Maria asked, suddenly curious about this man who had shared his home but little of his history. The question hung between them while lightning flashed and thunder answered. For a moment, Maria thought he would deflect, as he often did when personal matters arose. Instead, Troy moved to his saddlebag and withdrew a small bundle wrapped in soft leather. Returning to the table, he carefully unwrapped it, revealing a child's moccasin, blackened along one edge. "I was 7 when raiders attacked our camp," he began, his deep voice barely audible above the storm. "White men, though my father was also white. They came at dawn, firing into tipis without warning." Maria's breath caught, but she remained silent, recognizing the rarity of this confidence. "My mother hid me beneath a buffalo robe. I watched through a small gap as she was killed." His fingers gently touched the tiny moccasin. "Our tipi was set ablaze. In my panic to escape, I lost one moccasin to the flames. My father found me wandering alone, half mad with grief and fear." "I'm so sorry," Maria whispered. "For years I told myself I was a coward for hiding while my mother died." Troy's eyes met hers, decades of carried pain visible in their depths. "My father said I was a survivor, that my mother's last act of love was ensuring I lived." "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He tried to be," Troy acknowledged. "He brought me to his trading post, raised me in both worlds. When he died, neither would fully claim me." The rain's intensity increased, matching the weight of their shared confidences. Maria found herself reaching across the table, hesitantly placing her hand over Troy's. "The night my hair was cut, I told myself I was nothing without it," she confessed. "That my only value lay in something so easily taken." Troy turned his hand beneath hers, their palms meeting. And now, Maria touched her head, where copper fuzz had grown thick enough to cover her scalp. "Now I'm beginning to tell myself a different story." The storm continued through the night, but something had shifted in the cabin's atmosphere. Boundaries remained, but walls had begun to crumble, revealing the wounded souls sheltering behind them, souls perhaps more alike than either had imagined. The Quaker trader, Elijah Fisher, arrived on a crisp autumn morning, his wagon loaded with supplies to exchange for Troy's furs and Maria's preserved vegetables. Though their isolated homestead rarely received visitors, Fisher made the journey every 2 months, bringing not only goods, but news from both settlements. "Afraid I bring troubling tidings today," Fisher said as they shared coffee on the porch. A thin man with kind eyes and a voice soft from minimal use. He seemed reluctant to spoil the peaceful morning. "Suppose plainly, friend." Troy encouraged, his posture relaxed. Though Maria noticed the alertness in his eyes, Fisher reached into his coat, withdrawing a folded paper. "This is being circulated in Redemption Creek and beyond." Troy unfolded the paper, a crude wanted poster with his likeness roughly sketched beneath bold letters. "Indian A.B. Duck." Below the image, smaller text offered a reward for information leading to the rescue of Maria Cooper, daughter of William Cooper, forcibly taken by Apache half-breed. Maria's hand flew to her mouth. "My father," she whispered, the blood draining from her face. Troy handed her the poster, his expression carefully neutral. "When did this appear?" "About a week past," Fisher replied. "Cooper's been claiming his daughter was stolen, ever since she disappeared." Few paid him mind at first. The man's reputation for drink and wild tales precedes him. The trader glanced apologetically at Maria. "But recently, he's gotten backing from Samuel Blackwood, the cattle baron," Troy said, recognition darkening his features. "The man who wagered for Maria's hair." Fisher nodded. "Blackwood's offering the reward money. Word is, Cooper owes him substantial gambling debts. Seems Blackwood thinks retrieving you," he addressed Maria directly, "would make quite a spectacle. Good for business at his saloon, and bad for those who stand in his way." Troy added grimly. "There's talk of a search party," Fisher confirmed. "Not official, the sheriff wants no part of it. But Blackwood's hired guns aren't particular about jurisdiction." Maria stared at the poster, at the hateful caricature of Troy, rendered as a savage kidnapper. "But this is absurd. I left willingly. We're legally married." "Truth seldom travels as fast as a good story," Fisher said kindly, "especially when the story serves powerful interests." "Have they been asking about us?" Troy inquired, his mind clearly mapping the threat. "Some men questioned me last time I was in town," Fisher admitted. "I said nothing, of course, but others might not be so discreet. The reward is substantial." After Fisher departed with promises to warn them of any approaching parties, Troy and Maria took inventory of their situation, with the pragmatism of frontier survivors. "We should prepare for visitors," Troy said, checking the rifle that normally hung above the door. "Unwelcome one," Maria nodded, her initial shock hardening into resolve. "What do you need me to do?" Troy glanced at her, approval flashing briefly in his eyes. "No hysteria, no panic. Good." He began gathering ammunition. "First, we secure what can't be replaced. Then we plan for defense." They worked efficiently through the afternoon, catching valuables, preparing escape routes, positioning weapons at strategic points around the property. Troy showed Maria how to use the small derringer he kept for emergencies, its weight unfamiliar but reassuring in her palm. "I won't leave," Maria said firmly as they finished their preparations. "This is our home. I won't be rescued from a place I chose." Troy paused in his work, studying her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. "It would be safer for you to go with them," he said quietly. "Tell them I forced you. Return to town a victim rather than a willing wife to an Indian. Is that what you want?" Maria challenged, anger flaring at the suggestion. "What I want," Troy replied carefully, "is for you to be safe. What I want doesn't always align with what must be done." "Then hear me clearly," Maria said, stepping closer until barely a handspan separated them. "I will not deny our marriage. I will not pretend to be a victim to ease the conscience of men who would hunt you for sport or profit. Something shifted in Troy's expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight release of tension in his jaw. They will come with force, he warned. Men like Blackwood don't accept refusal. Then they'll find both of us ready, Maria answered. She reached up, touching her hair that had grown into a soft auburn cap, covering her head. I've already faced the worst they could do to me. They took my hair, my reputation, my place in that town. They will not take my choice, or my She hesitated only briefly. My husband. The word hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond the legal arrangement that had brought them together. Troy's hand rose slowly, his fingers gently brushing the curve of her cheek in a touch, so brief she might have imagined it. Then we prepare, he said simply. Together. That night, as they took turns keeping watch, Maria found herself reflecting on the cruel irony. Her father, who had publicly humiliated her, now casting himself as her protector. The man who had traded her dignity for gambling debts now offered money for her rescue. But beyond the anger lay a strange gratitude. Without her father's cruelty, without the public shearing that had stripped away her former life, she would never have found this place, this strength, this man whose quiet respect had helped her discover her own worth beyond appearance or station. When the hunters came, and they would come, they would find not the shamed, shorn girl who had fled Redemption Creek, but a woman prepared to defend her chosen life. They came at midday, when the sun stood high and shadows retreated to their smallest point. Troy spotted the dust on the trail. An hour before the riders appeared, 5 men on horseback, approaching without attempt at stealth. Maria recognized her father's stooped figure, even at a distance, his posture unmistakable despite months of separation. 6 months, she murmured, watching from the cabin window. 6 months since I left, and now he comes. Beside her, Troy checked his rifle one final time. Remember what we discussed. Stay inside until I call for you. Maria nodded, though every instinct urged her to stand beside him. They had planned carefully for this moment. Troy would meet the visitors alone, presenting a singular target rather than 2. Maria would remain hidden but ready, the derringer cold against her palm. From her vantage point, she watched Troy step onto the porch, rifle held casually, but visibly across his body. The riders halted at the boundary stones, maintaining a cautious distance. That's far enough, Troy called, his voice carrying clearly in the mountain air. William Cooper swayed slightly in his saddle, evidently fortified by liquid courage. Even from the cabin, Maria could see the empty whiskey bottle protruding from his saddlebag, its glass catching the sunlight like a signal mirror. Beside him sat Samuel Blackwood, immaculate, despite the dusty journey, and 3 hard-faced men. Maria didn't recognize, hired guns just as Fisher had warned. "We've come for my daughter," William shouted, his words slightly slurred. "Stand aside, Indy." "Your daughter isn't here," Troy replied evenly. "My wife lives here, and she's not leaving." Blackwood leaned forward in his saddle. "Now see here, Running Wolf. We know you took Cooper's girl. There's a reward for her safe return, but it can just as easily become a bounty on your head." Maria Cooper came willingly. "We were married by your own preacher." William's face contorted with rage. "No daughter of mine would marry a savage. You bewitched her somehow. Or perhaps," Troy interrupted coldly, "she preferred any alternative to a father who would shame her publicly for his gambling debts." The accusation hung in the air, causing William to flinch visibly. One of the hired guns shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Blackwood with newfound uncertainty. "Enough talk," Blackwood snapped. "Cooper, tell your daughter to come out. Now." "Maria," William bellowed. "Come out, girl. Your father's here to take you home." The moment had come. Maria took a deep breath, tucked the derringer into her pocket, and stepped onto the porch beside Troy. A collective murmur rose from the mounted men as they took in her appearance, not the shamed, shorn victim they expected, but a composed woman standing tall beside her husband. "Hello, Pa," she said calmly. "You're trespassing on our property." William's mouth opened and closed, his rehearsed tirade dying at the sight of her. Her hair had grown into a thick auburn cap that framed her face, and the months of mountain living had erased the last traces of the town girl he'd known. She stood differently, held herself differently, ownership and certainty in every line of her body. "Maria," he finally managed. "What's happened to you? This isn't you, girl. This is exactly me," she replied. "Without your shadow hanging over me, without your debts determining my worth." Blackwood cut in smoothly, his businessman's instinct recognizing the need for a different approach. "Miss Cooper, Miss Running Wolf, if you prefer, your father has been beside himself with worry. He's paid off his debts, sworn off gambling. He only wants to make amends." Maria's gaze shifted to Blackwood, noting the calculating assessment behind his solicitous words. "Is that why you're here, Mr. Blackwood?" Out of concern for family reconciliation, a flush crept up the cattle baron's neck. "I'm merely helping a distressed father. You're here because my story makes good entertainment," Maria interrupted. "First the shearing, now the rescue from the savage. What will you charge for drinks at the saloon while people discuss my return?" The accusation found its mark. Blackwood's expression hardened. "Don't be foolish, girl. You can't possibly prefer living like a squaw in this wilderness." Troy's posture tensed at the slur, but Maria placed a restraining hand on his arm. "I prefer living with a man of honor," she said clearly, ensuring every rider could hear. "I prefer this home we've built together, and I will not leave it. Not today, not ever." William dismounted unsteadily, approaching the boundary stones. "Maria, please. I'm your father." "You stopped being my father the moment you placed that razor against my head," Maria said, her voice steady despite the emotion churning beneath. "A father protects his daughter's dignity. He doesn't wager it away when he's drunk." The words struck William like physical blows. He seemed to age before her eyes, his bluster collapsing into something smaller and more pitiful. "I need you to come home," he admitted, his voice breaking. "The bank's foreclosing. Without a woman to keep house, I can't manage." "So that's it," Maria said softly. "Not concern for me, not love. You need a housekeeper." Blackwood signaled to his men, their hands moving toward holstered weapons. "This grows tiresome. Cooper, get your daughter while we handle the Indian." Troy raised his rifle a fraction. "Take one more step, and not all of you will ride out of this valley." A tense silence fell, broken only by the soft mountain breeze. Maria's hand found Troy's, their fingers intertwining publicly for the first time. "Leave now," she said, addressing all 5 men, "and don't return. I've made my choice." For one breathless moment, violence hung suspended in the air. Then William Cooper turned away, shoulders slumped in defeat. After a moment's hesitation, Blackwood signaled retreat. "This isn't over," Blackwood called as they mounted. "No white woman belongs with an Indian." "Then it's fortunate," Maria replied, her grip on Troy's hand tightening, "that I belong to myself." The confrontation with her father left Maria hollow, a strange emptiness replacing the fear and determination that had sustained her, though she maintained a stoic front as the riders disappeared down the trail. By nightfall, a bone-deep chill had settled into her body. She moved through evening chores by rote, her mind replaying the encounter in endless loops. Troy watched her with concern, noting the unnatural brightness of her eyes, the flush spreading across her cheeks. When she stumbled while carrying firewood, he was beside her instantly, his hand at her elbow. "You're burning up," he said, touching her forehead with the back of his hand. "I'm fine," Maria insisted, though the cabin seemed to tilt at odd angles around her. "Just tired." Troy guided her firmly toward the bed. "Lie down, please." Too exhausted to argue, Maria complied. The room spun sickeningly when she closed her eyes, forcing her to open them again, to focus on Troy as he built up the fire and set water to boil. From a small wooden chest, he withdrew a collection of dried plants, some familiar, others strange to Maria's feverish gaze. With practiced movements, he selected several, crumbling them into the steaming water. My mother was a healer, he explained, stirring the fragrant mixture. She taught me which plants draw out fever, which calm the spirit. My father looked old, Maria murmured. Her thoughts scattered. Did you see how old he looked? Troy brought the herbal infusion to her bedside. Drink this, small sips. The bitter liquid made her grimace, but she obeyed, letting Troy support her head as she drank. The simple intimacy of his touch, his hand cradling her neck, his concerned gaze meeting hers, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. I thought I was stronger, she whispered, ashamed of her weakness. This isn't weakness, Troy corrected gently. Even the strongest body reacts to shock. Your father's appearance, the confrontation, it would affect anyone. Through the night, as fever claimed her fully, Maria drifted between clarity and confusion. Troy remained beside her, applying cool cloths to her forehead, offering sips of the medicinal tea, speaking softly in both English and Apache when delirium made her restless. In her fever dreams, Maria stood again in Redemption Creek's town square, feeling the weight of her hair falling away. But this time, no one laughed. This time she raised her shorn head proudly, meeting every gaze without shame. I wanted to kill him, she confessed during a moment of lucidity, the fever loosening words she might otherwise have kept locked inside. When my father said he needed a housekeeper, I wanted to hurt him as he hurt me. But you didn't, Troy reminded her, replacing the cloth on her forehead with a fresh one. You chose dignity over vengeance. Not from goodness, Maria admitted. From indifference. He became too small to hate. Troy nodded, understanding in his eyes. That is its own kind of healing. Dawn broke with Maria still fevered, but resting more comfortably. Troy had maintained his vigil through the night, dozing occasionally in the chair he'd pulled alongside the bed. When she stirred, he was immediately alert, offering water and another dose of the medicinal herbs. You haven't slept, Maria observed, her voice raspy but her mind clearer. I've gone longer without, Troy replied, dismissing her concern. As morning sunlight filtered through the cabin windows, Maria noticed the collection of medicinal plants, arranged neatly on the table, bundles of sage, willow bark, elderflower, and others she couldn't identify. Some hung from the rafters drying, others had been prepared in small bowls ready for use. You turned our home into an Apache medicine lodge, she remarked, a faint smile touching her lips, despite her discomfort. Troy's expression softened at her use of our home. These plants don't belong to any one people, he said. They give their healing to whoever knows how to ask properly. As the day progressed, Maria's fever gradually subsided, leaving her weak but clear-headed. Troy prepared a simple broth, helping her sit up to eat. His hands, so capable with weapons and tools, showed surprising gentleness as he supported her. Your hair is growing nicely, he commented, as he helped her lie back down. Maria's hand went reflexively to her head, where the auburn strands had grown long enough to curl around her fingers. Does it matter to you? She asked, the question escaping before she could reconsider it. How I look? Troy was silent for a moment, his dark eyes thoughtful. I see you, Maria, he finally said, not just your hair or your face, but you. The woman who stood beside me against 5 armed men. The woman who chose a difficult path, rather than an easy lie. His words warmed something deep within her, something that had nothing to do with fever. When he turned to leave, to allow her rest, Maria found herself reaching for his hand. Stay, she said softly. Just stay with me a while. Troy settled back into the chair, his calloused fingers entwining with hers. As Maria drifted toward healing sleep, she felt his thumb trace a gentle circle on the back of her hand, a small, tender gesture that spoke volumes more than words ever could. For the first time since leaving Redemption Creek, Maria felt truly at home, not just in the cabin or the valley, but in her own skin, in the life she had chosen, in the presence of the man whose quiet strength had helped her rediscover her own. Winter approached the mountain valley, painting the aspen leaves gold before stripping them bare. Maria's strength returned fully as the days shortened, her body and spirit resilient after the fever. Something had shifted between her and Troy during her illness, a tentative warmth replacing the careful distance they had maintained for months. One clear morning, Troy appeared at breakfast with a handmade bow, smaller than his hunting bow, crafted of supple wood with intricate carvings along its length. "For you," he said, placing it on the table between them. "Winter is coming. You should know how to hunt, if necessary." Maria touched the bow reverently, fingers tracing the carvings. "I'll never master this as you have." "You don't need to," Troy replied. "You only need to feed yourself if I'm unable to return." The implication that circumstances might prevent his return hung in the air between them. Life in the mountains held no guarantees. They both understood this reality without needing to voice it. "Then teach me," Maria said, accepting both the gift and the responsibility it represented. They began that afternoon in the clearing behind the cabin. Troy positioned himself behind Maria, adjusting her stance with careful hands, showing her how to nock an arrow, how to draw the bowstring to her cheek. His breath warmed her ear as he murmured instructions, his body a solid presence at her back. "Breathe with the bow," he advised. "Feel it as an extension of yourself." Maria's first attempts sent arrows wildly astray, some falling embarrassingly short of the target Troy had fashioned from straw and canvas. But he showed no impatience, only quiet encouragement and occasional corrections to her form. "My father tried teaching me to shoot a rifle once," Maria remarked as she retrieved her scattered arrows. "He gave up after 10 minutes. Said women lacked the temperament for weapons." Troy snorted softly. "Your father understood little about women or weapons." The unexpected comment startled a laugh from Maria, perhaps the first genuine laugh since coming to the cabin. The sound seemed to surprise Troy as well, a smile briefly transforming his serious features. Days passed with archery lessons becoming part of their routine. Troy expanded her education to include tracking, recognizing animal signs, finding north without a compass. Maria absorbed everything eagerly, her confidence growing with each new skill mastered. "Your mother's people are great teachers," she observed one evening, as they returned from tracking a deer through freshly fallen snow. "As are yours," Troy replied. "I would welcome learning whatever skills you brought from your world." The simple acknowledgement that she too had valuable knowledge to share touched Maria deeply. The next day, she began teaching Troy her mother's methods for preserving fruits, techniques for extracting longer life from candles, and the fine points of bread making that had been passed down through generations of Cooper women. Troy proved an apt pupil, his hunter's precision translating well to domestic tasks. When their first loaf emerged from the Dutch oven with a perfect golden crust, they shared it with a sense of mutual accomplishment that felt remarkably like joy. One afternoon, while practicing at greater distances with the bow, Maria's arrow flew true for the first time, striking near the center of the target. The triumph of the moment overtook her. She turned to Troy with an exuberant smile, seeking his approval. She found him watching her with an expression that stole her breath. Pride mingled with something deeper, warmer. Without thinking, Maria closed the distance between them and threw her arms around his neck in an impulsive embrace. Troy stiffened momentarily. Then his arms came around her, returning the embrace with careful pressure. They stood frozen in the autumn sunlight, the contact both foreign and somehow inevitable. When they finally separated, neither acknowledged the moment directly, but something fundamental had changed. That evening, as they tracked a young buck through the forest for Maria's first hunting experience, Troy stopped suddenly, raising his hand for silence. Ahead, in a small clearing, stood their quarry, a year-eel deer with small antlers, grazing peacefully. Troy wordlessly offered Maria his hunting bow, stronger and more lethal than her practice weapon. She accepted it, understanding the honor he extended. With movements now practiced and fluid, she nocked an arrow, drew and breathed with the bow as he had taught her. The deer raised its head, sensing danger. In that suspended moment, predator and prey locked eyes across the clearing. Maria felt Troy's steadying presence beside her, his confidence in her ability a tangible force. She loosed the arrow. It flew straight and true, finding its mark with merciful precision. The deer dropped without suffering. Its life ended cleanly. "A good kill," Troy said quietly, as they approached the fallen animal. "Respectful, quick." Maria knelt beside the deer, unexpectedly moved by the gravity of taking a life to sustain their own. Troy showed her the Apache prayer of thanks, the proper way to honor the animal's sacrifice. As they worked together to dress the deer, their hands sometimes brushing in the shared task, Maria realized how far she had traveled from the girl in Redemption Creek, not just in miles but in understanding, in capability, in self-reliance. That night, enjoying stew made from Maria's first deer, they sat closer than usual before the fire. When Troy finally rose to take his place on the pallet near the hearth, Maria found herself reaching for his hand. "We've shared so much," she said softly. "Knowledge, work, this home." She hesitated, gathering courage. "Perhaps we could share more." The invitation hung between them, unmistakable in its meaning. Troy studied her face in the firelight, searching for certainty. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice deeper than usual. Maria nodded, the last of her reservations falling away like autumn leaves. "I'm sure." Spring arrived in the mountain valley, transforming the landscape with tender green shoots and wildflower blooms. Inside the cabin, a different transformation had taken place over the winter month. The invisible boundary that had once divided the living space had dissolved, replaced by a shared intimacy neither Maria nor Troy had anticipated when they spoke their hasty vows. Maria stood at the garden's edge, her hair now grown to just below her ears, ruffling in the breeze. The auburn waves caught the morning light, no longer a source of shame, but simply a part of her, like the strength in her arms or the newfound confidence in her stance. "I need to return to Redemption Creek," she said when Troy joined her, the decision formed during a restless night. Troy's expression remained neutral, though she felt the subtle tension that entered his body. "Why? To finish it properly," Maria explained, turning to face him. "We left so quickly. There are things I abandoned. My mother's Bible. Some letters. Small things, but mine." "Your father is not why I'm going," she interrupted gently. "I'm not seeking reconciliation or confrontation, just completion." Troy studied her face, reading the certainty there. After months together, they had developed an understanding that went beyond words, a recognition of each other's needs and strength. "Then we'll go together," he said simply. Maria shook her head. "No, this is something I need to do alone." A shadow crossed Troy's face. "Redemption Creek isn't safe for you alone." "It wasn't safe for me with my father," Maria countered. "But I'm not that woman anymore." She touched the hunting knife at her belt, a constant companion since Troy had taught her its use. "I won't stay long. Just enough to gather what's mine and perhaps see what's become of him." Troy recognized the resolve in her voice, the same quiet determination that had carried her through learning to hunt, to track, to defend herself. He nodded slowly, respecting her choice even as concern lingered in his eyes. 2 days, he conceded. "If you're not back by sundown of the second day, I'll come looking." "Fair enough," Maria agreed, reaching for his hand. "Thank you for understanding." Troy's fingers intertwined with hers, the calluses on both their hands testimony to their shared life of work and purpose. "Just remember who you are now," he said softly, "not who they once made you believe you were." Maria rode into Redemption Creek on Shadow, Troy's prized Mustang, a gesture of trust that spoke volumes about how their relationship had evolved. The town appeared both familiar and strangely diminished, as if she viewed it through the wrong end of a spyglass. She wore her fringed leather shawl over a simple dress, her knife visible at her belt. Her hair, though still short by conventional standards, framed her face in soft waves that caught the spring sunlight. She sat straight in the saddle, neither hiding nor announcing her presence. Eyes turned as she passed. Whispers followed. Maria registered the attention with detached awareness, no longer defined by others' opinions. She tethered Shadow outside the general store and stepped inside, where Martha Gunderson's welcoming smile offered a rare bit of warmth. Maria, running wolf. The older woman greeted her, using the married name without hesitation. A sight for these tired eyes. "Hello, Mrs. Gunderson," Maria replied, surprised by the genuine pleasure she felt at seeing the shopkeeper. "I've come to collect a few things from my father's house." Martha's expression sobered. "You haven't heard, then? Your father lost the house to the bank 3 months past. He's taken a room above the saloon, works for Blackwood now, cleaning up, mostly." The news settled in Maria without the sting she might once have expected. "I see, and my belongings. I saved what I could," Martha confessed, disappearing into the back room. She returned with a small wooden crate. "Not much, I'm afraid. The Bible you mentioned, some letters, a few personal items." Maria's throat tightened at the unexpected kindness. "I don't know how to thank you." "No need," Martha assured her. "I only did what any decent person would." She hesitated, then added, "Your shawl, it's lovely work. Apache design?" "Yes," Maria smiled, fingers touching the intricate beadwork. "I've been learning their techniques. They're remarkable artisans." The simple exchange, acknowledging the value of Apache craftsmanship in this town that had so often dismissed them as savages, felt quietly revolutionary. After declining Martha's offer of tea, Maria secured the crate to Shadow's saddle and continued her errand. She needed to see for herself what remained of her old life. The Cooper house stood empty, its windows blank and accusing. Maria dismounted, approaching the porch where she had spent countless evenings watching the town's comings and goings. Without the furniture, without her father's presence, it seemed smaller, less substantial. She was turning to leave when a familiar figure stumbled from the saloon across the street. William Cooper, grayer and more stooped than when she'd last seen him, froze mid-step as recognition dawned. "Maria?" he called, his voice cracking with disbelief. She hadn't planned this encounter, had hoped to avoid it entirely. Yet now, facing the man who had once wielded such power over her life, Maria felt oddly calm. "Hello, Pa," she replied, keeping a measured distance between them. William took an unsteady step forward. "You've come back. I knew you would. Once you saw what life with that Indian was really like." "I haven't come back," Maria corrected him gently. "I've come for what's mine, and I'll be returning to my husband before nightfall." The simple declaration silenced him momentarily. He squinted, taking in her changed appearance, the confidence in her posture, the knife at her belt. "You look different," he finally managed. "I am different," Maria agreed. "As are you." William glanced down at his shabby clothes, a flush of shame crossing his weathered features. "Times have been hard," he muttered. "Since you left, everything's fallen apart." "You were falling apart long before I left," Maria said, not unkindly. "I just couldn't see it then." A flicker of the old anger crossed his face. "So you've come to gloat, to see your father brought low?" "No," Maria shook her head. "I came for closure, and perhaps to forgive." The unexpected word hung between them, neither accusation nor absolution, simply an acknowledgement of the past's hold and the choice to release it. "I don't need your forgiveness," William blustered, though his eyes told a different story. "Perhaps not," Maria agreed, "but I needed to offer it." She mounted Shadow with the fluid grace Troy had taught her. "Goodbye, Pa." As she rode out of Redemption Creek, Maria felt the last threads binding her to her former life fall away. The town diminished behind her, while ahead lay the mountains, the valley, the cabin, and Troy, home, in every sense that mattered. Maria returned to the cabin as sunset painted the mountains gold. Troy stood on the porch, his tall figure silhouetted against the fading light, shoulders relaxing visibly when she appeared on the trail. Though he had respected her need to make the journey alone, his relief at her safe return was unmistakable. "You're back earlier than expected," he said, as she dismounted, taking Shadow's reins to lead him to the bar. "There was less to keep me there than I thought," Maria replied, lifting the small crate from the saddle. Martha Gunderson saved what mattered. Later, after Shadow was tended and supper shared, they sat before the fire while Maria unpacked the meager collection that represented her former life, her mother's Bible with pressed flowers between its pages, a handful of letters, a small silver hairpin that had been her grandmother's. Troy watched silently as she examined each item, understanding this was a private ritual of sorts, an accounting of what had been and what remained. When she held up the tarnished hairpin, studying it in the firelight, he reached into his pocket. "I have something for you," he said, extending his hand to reveal a new silver hairpin, its design a blend of Apache patterns and frontier craftsmanship. "I traded with the silversmith at the settlement while you were gone." Maria took it with wondering fingers. "It's beautiful." "Your hair," Troy explained, a hint of uncertainty in his usually confident voice. "It's long enough now to use such things." The simple observation, acknowledging both her changed appearance and the time that had passed since her shearing, brought unexpected emotion to Maria's throat. She reached up, touching the auburn waves that now curled just below her ears, no longer the mark of shame they had once been. "Would you?" She hesitated, then continued, "Would you help me place it?" Troy moved behind her, his fingers unexpectedly gentle as they sorted through her short curls, finding a way to secure the pin despite the limited length. The intimacy of the moment, his hands in her hair, his breath warming her neck, reminded Maria how far they had traveled from their first awkward days as strangers bound by hasty vows. "There," he said softly, his hands lingering a moment longer than necessary. When he returned to his seat across from her, Troy's expression had grown serious. "I've been thinking while you were away," he began, his deep voice measured, "about our arrangement." Maria felt a flicker of unease. "Our marriage?" "Yes." Troy's dark eyes held hers steadily. "It began as a solution to an immediate problem, a way to offer you protection and escape." "It was," Maria agreed cautiously, uncertain where this conversation led. "The circumstances that brought you here have changed," Troy continued. "You've proven you can ride into Redemption Creek alone, face your past, and return unharmed. You have skills now, hunting, tracking, survival. You could make your own way if you wished." Understanding dawned slowly. "Are you releasing me from our arrangement?" Troy's expression remained carefully neutral. "I'm acknowledging that you no longer need my protection, that perhaps you never truly did." He paused, choosing his next words with evident care. "If you wish to leave to start fresh elsewhere without the complications of being married to a man between worlds, I would understand." The unexpected offer left Maria momentarily speechless. She studied Troy's face, noting the subtle tension around his eyes, the careful way he held himself braced. She realized for her decision. "Do you want me to leave?" she asked direct. "What I want," Troy replied with deliberate precision, "is for you to stay because you choose to, not because you feel obligated by vows spoken in desperation." The truth of his words resonated deeply. Their marriage had begun as an escape route, a practical solution to an immediate crisis. But somewhere during these months of shared work and growing intimacy, it had become something neither of them had anticipated. Maria rose from her chair, crossing the small space between them. She knelt beside Troy's seat, taking his weathered hands in hers. "When I rode back from Redemption Creek today," she said softly, "I wasn't returning to an arrangement or seeking protection. I was coming home." She squeezed his hands gently. "To you." The careful neutrality in Troy's expression gave way to something more vulnerable, more genuine. His hands turned in hers, their fingers intertwining. "I choose this life," Maria continued, her voice gaining strength. "I choose this cabin, this valley." Her eyes held his without wavering. "I choose you, Troy." Running wolf, not from necessity or gratitude, but because here, with you, I found myself. Troy's response wasn't in words. With deliberate slowness, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward until his forehead rested against hers. an intimate gesture she had seen between Apache couples, signifying a connection beyond physical desire. "Then I choose you as well, Maria, Running Wolf," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not as the woman I rescued, but as the woman who stands beside me as an equal." As the fire crackled and night deepened around the cabin, they remained thus connected, foreheads touching, hands entwined, remaking their hasty vows into something truer, chosen rather than compelled, born not from crisis, but from genuine understanding and affection. The silver hairpin caught the firelight, winking like a star from Maria's copper curls, no longer merely an ornament, but a symbol of transformation complete. Summer bloomed across the valley, bringing long days of work and quiet evenings of content. Maria and Troy fell into the rhythm of a true partnership, sharing tasks, respecting each other's strengths. Their initial hesitancy replaced by a comfortable familiarity. The cabin that had once felt temporary to Maria now bore her imprint everywhere. Herbs drying from the rafters, curtains fashioned from fabric. Martha Gunderson had sent wildflowers in a pottery vase. Troy had traded for with the Apache. They were awakened just past midnight by Shadow's agitated whinnying. Troy was instantly alert, reaching for the rifle beside the bed before his feet touched the floor. Maria sat up, sleep evaporating, as she registered the tension in his posture. "Someone's out there," he whispered, moving to the window with practiced silence. Maria slipped from bed, pulling on a dress and reaching for her knife in one fluid motion. Months in the wilderness had honed her responses. Fear remained, but panic had no place in it. "How many?" she asked, joining Troy at the window. "At least 4, maybe more." He gestured toward the barn where shadows moved with deliberate stealth. "They're after the horses first. Standard tactic. Cut off escape." A lantern hung near the door, its flame low but steady. Troy extinguished it with a quick breath, plunging the cabin into darkness that would better protect them while their eyes adjusted. "Blackwood's men?" Maria guessed, thinking of the cattle baron's parting threat months ago. Troy shook his head. "Can't tell yet." He moved to the door, checking that the heavy bar was secure. "We need to know their intentions before." The sound of breaking glass interrupted him as a bottle crashed through the window, igniting instantly into flames as it struck the table. The coal oil lantern Maria had been cleaning earlier that evening had left enough residue to catch immediately, sending fire racing across the wooden surface. "They mean to burn us out," Troy said grimly, moving quickly to smother the flames with a blanket while Maria grabbed the water bucket. Outside, a voice called through the darkness, slurred but recognizable. "Come out, daughter. I've come to take you home." Maria froze, the water bucket half raised. "My father, and others with him," Troy confirmed, peering cautiously through the broken window. "Blackwood's men, I think. Your father's just the excuse." Another flaming bottle crashed through the second window, this one igniting the curtains Maria had so carefully sewn. As they fought the spreading fire, the attackers grew bolder, approaching the cabin from multiple sides. "We can't stay here," Troy decided, grabbing essential supplies with quick efficiency. "They'll burn it down around us." "I won't run," Maria said firmly, her jaw set with determination. "This is our home." Troy paused, studying her face in the flickering firelight. "Not running," he corrected. "Tactical retreat. We know this land better than they do." Understanding dawned. "The cave behind the ridge," Maria nodded. "We can circle back, come at them from above." The strategy formed between them without need for lengthy explanation, a testament to their months of working as one. Troy gathered ammunition while Maria collected their water skins and Troy's medicine pouch. Years of frontier living had taught them both which items were truly irreplaceable. As smoke filled the cabin, they slipped out through the root cellar Troy had dug beneath the kitchen floor, an escape route he had created but hoped never to use. The narrow tunnel emerged behind the woodpile, offering momentary cover as they assessed their surroundings. 5 men total, Maria's father and 4 others, 2 watching the front door while the others continued lobbing flaming bottles through the windows. The fire was catching properly now, illuminating the clearing with an ominous orange glow. "Stay low, move fast," Troy whispered. Head for the creek bed. I'll meet you at the cave entrance. We go together, Maria insisted, gripping his arm. A shout from near the barn interrupted their whispered debate. One of Blackwood's men had discovered Shadow and the packhorse were missing. Troy had evidently released them earlier when he first sensed danger. They know we're not trapped, Troy muttered. They'll start searching. Go now, Maria, please. The urgency in his voice convinced her. With a quick squeeze of his hand, Maria slipped away, using the skills Troy had taught her to move silently through the underbrush toward the creek. She had nearly reached the water when her father's voice called out much closer than expected. I see you, girl. Stop running from your own blood. Maria froze, crouching behind a fallen log, as William Cooper staggered through the trees, a rifle clutched in his unsteady hands and a bottle of whiskey protruding from his coat pocket. The broken lantern lay forgotten at his feet, its glass shattered across the ground. I know you're here, he continued, his voice rising. Blackwood's paying good money to burn out that Indian and bring you home. Be reasonable now. Maria weighed her options. The creek lay just beyond the next stand of trees, but reaching it meant crossing open ground. Her father stood directly in her path, drunk but armed and unpredictable. A sharp whistle cut through the night, Troy's signal that danger approached. Maria had seconds to decide. Rising from her hiding place, she called softly, I'm here, Pa. William spun toward her voice, rifle wavering. Maria, that you, girl? It's me, she confirmed, stepping cautiously into a shaft of moonlight where he could see her. What are you doing here, Pa? Taking you home, he replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to burn down her house in the middle of the night. Away from that savage. That savage is my husband, Maria said evenly, taking another careful step forward. And you're helping Blackwood destroy my home. William's expression darkened. No daughter of mine belongs with an Indian. I stopped being your daughter the day you shaved my head to pay a gambling debt, Maria replied, her voice steady despite the anger and grief churning beneath. Now I'm just a woman defending her home. The truth of her words seemed to penetrate William's alcohol-fogged mind, his face contorted with rage and shame. Then you're no better than him. He raised the rifle, its barrel weaving unsteadily in her direction. Don't do this, Pa, Maria warned, her hand moving slowly toward her knife. It's for your own good, William insisted, his finger finding the trigger. A shadow materialized behind him. Troy, moving with the silent efficiency of a lifetime spent hunting. Before William could fire, Troy struck, disarming him with a precise blow. The struggle was brief, but violent. Despite his drunkenness, William fought with desperate strength, landing a solid punch to Troy's jaw before Troy could subdue him. As they grappled, William's hand found the whiskey bottle in his pocket, smashing it against a rock and lunging at Troy with the jagged remains. No, Maria cried, launching herself forward. What happened next seemed to unfold in terrible slow motion. The broken bottle slashed across Troy's arm as Maria collided with her father. All three went down in a tangle of limbs. There was a sickening crack as William's head struck the fallen lantern, the jagged glass slicing deep into his temple. Pierre? Maria's voice sounded distant to her own ears as she disentangled herself. William Cooper lay motionless, blood pooling beneath his head, eyes staring sightlessly at the moon-dappled sky. The broken lantern lay beside him, its glass now stained dark red. 1 year later, Maria stood on the porch of their rebuilt cabin, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of amber and gold. Her hair, now grown to her shoulders, was gathered in a simple braid woven with colored threads in the Apache style, a gift from Nahila during their last visit to the summer camp. Behind her, Troy emerged from the cabin, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. The scar on his forearm had faded to a pale line, a permanent reminder of that terrible night when flames claimed their first home and blood stained the ground beneath the broken lantern. You're up early, he observed, handing her one of the cups. Good dreams, Maria replied, a soft smile touching her lips. For a change, the nightmares had been frequent in the months following her father's death, confused, guilt-laden images of fire and broken glass, of William Cooper's sightless eyes staring up at the night sky. Though the territorial marshal had ruled it a clear case of self-defense, Maria had struggled to reconcile her complicated feelings about the father who had both shaped and shattered her life. Blackwood's men were sentenced yesterday, Troy said, his deep voice pulling her back to the present. Fisher brought word when he delivered the supplies. Maria nodded. The aftermath of the attack had brought unexpected justice. When Blackwood's hired guns fled after William's death, leaving his body behind, they had eventually been captured in the next territory. Their testimony, given in exchange for reduced sentences, had implicated Blackwood in orchestrating the attack. And Blackwood himself? She asked, though she already knew the answer. 10 years at the territorial prison, Troy confirmed. His saloon's been sold to cover the fines. A fitting end, Maria thought, for the man whose cruel wager had set her life on its unexpected course. Had Blackwood not demanded her hair as payment for her father's gambling debt, she might never have found her way to this mountain valley, to this life, to Troy. "What are you thinking?" Troy asked, noting her pensive expression. Maria touched her braid, a gesture that had become habitual. "About paths. How the cruelest moment of my life led to everything I now cherish." Troy's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity of a love built slowly but solidly. The Apache have a saying, "The wound is where the light enters." The wisdom of the words resonated deeply. Maria had indeed been wounded by her father's betrayal, by public humiliation, by the loss of what she had once considered her only beauty. Yet through those very wounds, light had found its way into her life, illuminating strengths she never knew she possessed. Their moment of reflection was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Troy straightened, his posture alert but not alarmed as a rider appeared on the trail, Martha Gunderson's son delivering mail from town. Among the letters was one from Redemption Creek's new minister, confirming that William Cooper's grave now had a proper marker, paid for with Maria's share from the sale of his few remaining possessions. Not out of obligation, but as a final act of closure, acknowledging the complicated man who had been her father, with all his flaws and failures. As the day progressed, Maria worked in the expanded garden where Nahila's gifted seeds had flourished alongside traditional crops. The Apache elder had become an unexpected ally, visiting regularly to share knowledge of plants and healing traditions. Through her, Maria had gained a tentative acceptance among Troy's mother's people, not complete belonging, but respect that grew with each passing season. By midday, Troy returned from hunting, a brace of rabbits indicating successful snares. They worked together to prepare the evening meal, moving around each other in the kitchen with the synchronized rhythm of long partnership. "The Fishers have invited us for dinner next week," Maria mentioned, as they ate. "Sarah Fisher is expecting their third child." Troy nodded, considering it's good to maintain connections with neighbors. Though still reserved by nature, he had gradually opened to wider relationships, recognizing that their isolated life benefited from careful alliances. As evening approached, they sat together on the porch, watching the day's light fade from the valley. Maria leaned against Troy's shoulder, his arm around her a welcome weight. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life," she confessed. "That morning in Redemption Creek seems like a dream about someone else entirely." "In some ways, it was someone else," Troy replied thoughtfully. "We are remade by our choices, our struggles." His hand gently touched her braid, "By what we lose and what we find." Maria turned her face up to his, studying the features that had become as familiar to her as her own. The strong line of his jaw, the quiet wisdom in his dark eyes, the subtle curve of his mouth that appeared more often now that laughter had found its way into their home. "I found you," she said simply. Troy's smile deepened, the expression once rare now freely given. "And I found you as darkness settled over the valley." They spoke of practical matters, plans for the coming winter, improvements to the barn, whether to expand their small herd of goats. Ordinary conversations between partners, sharing a life remarkable only in how unremarkable they had become. Later, as they prepared for sleep in the cabin that had risen from the ashes of its predecessor, Maria caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. Troy had carved as a gift for their first anniversary. Her reflection showed a woman wholly different from the shamed, shorn girl who had fled Redemption Creek, her hair now grown enough for the intricate braid that combined her world with Troy's, her eyes clear and direct, her posture that of someone who knew her own worth. She turned away from the mirror, no longer needing its confirmation. Her true reflection existed in Troy's eyes, in the life they had built together, in the strength she had discovered within herself, a beauty far more lasting than the golden hair once shorn in cruelty and now regrown in freedom. Their hands met in the darkness, fingers intertwining as they had on the day Troy had said, "I'll marry you tonight," a moment of desperation transformed by time and choice into one of the deepest love.